and welcome to the Brac Shop. And I'm going to take you to the most haunted castle or building in the country. So stay tuned and you'll see a whole array of different ghosts. In fact, there's so many, this is going to be split up into two parts. See you soon. So welcome to the Brac Shop. Now you may have missed me over the last couple of weeks, and that's because I haven't been too well. And I'm just beginning to wonder, maybe it's all the research I've been doing into the paranormal, and because just strange things have happened, or maybe I'm just noticing things that normally happen which I haven't noticed before. But physically I haven't been that well. Maybe I've attracted it, delving into all these paranormal stuff. So I've noticed, like when I was doing research on possessed toys like Annabelle and Robert the doll, that strange things did happen. But I'm going to be bringing you an episode on protection. So if you do delve into these things or research in these things or even just look at these things, you'll be protected as well. So stay tuned, and don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe down below and press a like if you like these videos, and press the button so you'll be notified when my next video comes out. And you don't want to miss next week's either, because today's episode is in two parts. It's the Tower of London with all its ghosts, so you don't want to miss the next part of it as well. So subscribe if you haven't already, press the bell so you won't miss out, and like it and share the videos. So I'm going to go into the Tower of London. It's one of the most haunted places in the country. Now, it was built back in 1078 when William the Conqueror won the Battle of Hastings in 1066 and conquered the country. Hence William the Conqueror. Now, he built the tower as a place of prestige and also dominance over the people. And through the years, the tower has always been a symbol of supremacy, because whoever rules the tower rules the country. And the tower has been used for quite a few different things through the years, because not only has it been a place of residence, it's been a prison as well. It's been an observatory for the stars. It's been a zoo where they've kept a whole range of animals. And it's been a mint where they used to make money. So obviously so much has happened there, and a lot of imprints of people's energies and experiences have imprinted it onto the walls of the tower. Now, the tower has so many different ghosts and spirits and apparitions there. They even have animals there as well, animal ghosts. But the first record of a ghost or an apparition or a spirit at the tower was in 1240. And that was when they were extending the walls of the tower. They were building an outer wall to protect it. Now, one of the main entrances to the tower was from the river. And if you look at a map of the tower, the original entrance from the river was through the Bloody Tower, which originally used to be known as the Garden Tower. But after the death of the two princes, they changed the name to the Bloody Tower. So originally the tower was entered through the Garden Tower, and that would take you into the gardens and to the White Tower, where the royal family used to live, right on the upper floors, and the lower floors were living quarters, and lower down the servants, and the basement would be the dungeons where the tortures would take place. So now when 1240 King Henry III was expanding the tower, and he was making the outer walls, and so he was building a new entrance from the river into the tower, and which is actually now known as Traitors Gate, because that was the gate where the prisoners would come in, and a lot of them would have been brought in for treason. And while they were building the gateway a strange massive storm came up and destroyed the whole gate to the tower. And it just happened to be on St. George's Day. And they rebuilt the gateway again, and it was almost a whole year from when the gate collapsed. So a year hence, and again on St. George's Day, apparently the whole gateway collapsed yet again. Now, one of the priests around the tower actually said he had seen the spirit or the ghost of Sir Thomas Becket on top of the construction with his cross, saying that the gateway was for the glory of the king and not for the people, and destroyed the gateway. Now, if we go back, Thomas Becket was actually friends with the king's grandfather, King Henry II. And being good friends, actually became the Archbishop of Canterbury from 1162 to 1170. Now Thomas Becket, he and Henry II used to discuss the church and the cleric, and they ended up having a few altercations or disagreements about the church and the clerics. And so Thomas Becket kept pestering the king with this and that and the other. Now, one day King Henry II, in jest, said, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" Now, without him knowing, 4 of his knights overheard him, and they thought they'd do his command and get rid of this turbulent priest. So they went off to Canterbury Cathedral, and that's where they found Sir Thomas Becket and murdered him.
Wasn't a very nice murder either, because they cut off the top of his head and splattered his brains all over the floor. Not very nice. And it wasn't what King Henry II wanted at all. It was just in jest, but the knights took it seriously. And Sir Thomas Becket was actually made into a saint by Pope Alexander III. So Henry III realized what Sir Thomas Becket meant to the country and the royal family. And so he actually dedicated a tower to be built on top of Traitors Gate and dedicated it to Sir Thomas Becket. He also had a chapel built there as well. And so they were able to complete the tower and Traitors Gate, the entrance to the tower from the river. Now, Sir Thomas Becket, he actually used to be around the tower quite a bit. He knew the tower quite well because he was a constable there. Sir Thomas's tower is haunted as well. Now, there's people have heard stories of a monk's footsteps with his sandals on the stone floor. But the thing is, they no longer have a stone floor. It's all carpeted, so that's a bit strange. And all will open up, stay open for a while, and then close again. And another strange thing was, while one of the guards was outside the tower, he noticed a face at the window. Now, at the time, it was actually occupied by one of the brigadiers and his wife, and they were just returning home. And he approached them and he said, "Have you got visitors in the house?" And the wife said, "Oh, is it there again?" So they were obviously aware of strange things going on in St. Thomas's Tower. And on the other side of the tower, which is above Traitors Gate and to the outside, and today they've now built a walkway where tourists can walk and passers-by can walk outside the tower just along the river. Now, back in 1974, about 7:30 in the morning, a passerby was walking past and he saw a blue light at the Traitors Gate, and he saw a barge coming through with people dressed in Tudor outfits, and then they just disappeared. Now, he thought this was very strange and he actually reported it. And from the description, it sounded very much like a reenactment of the arrival of Queen Catherine Howard when she was supposed to be incarcerated in the Tower and to be executed. So, how do you explain things like that? It could be one of the replays of the energies that had been absorbed in the surrounding walls and then just happened to be replayed right at the right time that that person was passing by. Who's to say? Now, the Tower has been the entrance for royals and people to enter the Tower from the river, and it's called Traitors Gate because a lot of the prisoners were brought into the Tower from the river, and royals as well. Royal traitors accused of treasons like Catherine Howard, Anne Boleyn, Sir Walter Raleigh. So many people brought through the Tower, brought through Traitors Gate. And they'd pass through the gate and then through the bloody Tower, up the steps, and there you would have on your left the Tower Green, and to your right the White Tower, the main residential complex. And the Tower, although it's housed many prisoners, there's only been 7 executions in the Tower. Now, most of the executions actually took place on Tower Hill, and that was a place just north of the Tower, just outside the Tower, and that's where the public executions would take place, and people, the public, would just come and watch the executions. Now, inside the Tower, only 7 people were privately executed, and on the Tower Green, only 6, including Margaret Pole, the Countess of Salisbury. Now, she was the oldest person to be executed in the Tower, being 67 years old. Born in 1473, she was the niece of King Edward IV. However, she lost everything when King Richard III came to the throne. She managed to gain it back when he was killed in battle. However, she actually became the 5th richest peer in England at the time. Later on, she fell in favour with King Henry VIII. And she became lady-in-waiting to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. And she became the governess to his daughter, Princess Mary, who later became Mary I. As we all know through history, Henry VIII fell in love with Anne Boleyn and got a divorce from Catherine of Aragon. However, Margaret Pole stayed loyal to Catherine of Aragon and Princess Mary and continued to be the governess, and used her own money to support her services to Princess Mary. Now, when she was younger, she was betrothed to Richard Pole, which is why she became Margaret Pole. And she had 5 children. Now, her 3rd son was Reginald Pole, who became a priest and later became Archbishop of Canterbury. And he was quite friendly with Henry VIII. But I had a bit of a falling out. Gerald Pole wanted to be true to Catholicism, and he had his debates with Henry VIII. So he fled the country and stayed in exile in France. But it was there that he was rounding up troops to set a campaign of rebellion to bring back Catholicism. Now, Margaret Pole, she owned a lot of property in the south of England, and it was thought that she was part of this rebellion because they could come over and have a place to stay while they start to invade the country. So she was arrested in 1539 and sent to the Tower. Now, her son, Reginald Pole, was told to come back to the country and face these charges. Otherwise, Margaret Pole would be beheaded in his place. Now, being his mother, you would have thought he would have came back and tried to work it out with the king, but he remained abroad in France. So on the 27th of May in 1541, in the morning, with an hour's notice, she was told that she was to be executed. Now, she didn't really know why, because she didn't have anything to do with this rebellion. It was all her sons. But she ended up getting taken to the block on Tower Green. Now, the main executioner was sent up north to fight the rebellion. And so she was given a young, inexperienced executioner to do the job. And he actually did quite a barbaric job of it. And there's two different versions of this. Her head was on the block, and the executioner missed her head. He actually got her in the shoulder, and he hacked 11 times at her before he finally killed her. Now, the second version is that he came down with the axe and he got her in the shoulder. And that's when she got up screaming and started running away. And he went chasing after her, and he hacked at her 11 times before she finally collapsed and died, and he cut her head off. Very gruesome, horrible death. And every year on her anniversary, they say her ghost goes running around Tower Green, still trying to get away from the executioner, I would say. Now, probably the most famous ghost of the tower is Anne Boleyn. She was one of the ladies in waiting to King Henry VIII's court, and she caught his eye. And so we all know the story. He divorced Catherine of Aragon and married Anne Boleyn. Now, she had a child, but to the king's disappointment, it was a girl, because only the boys had a right to inherit the throne first. And so he grew tired of her. Actually, he found Jane Seymour. And now he did change back to Anne Boleyn because she was pregnant again. And this time she had a boy, but unfortunately he was stillborn. So the king again grew tired of her. And he was getting very interested in Jane Seymour. And so he wanted to get rid of Anne Boleyn. So he accused Anne Boleyn of all these crimes, like adultery, incest, witchcraft, treason, and a whole lot of other crimes as well. And so she was taken to the tower and imprisoned and sentenced to be executed. Now, she requested that the job actually be done with a sword and not an axe, to get it over and done with straight away with one blow. And so she was quite fortunate that her executioner that was appointed to her was from France. They had actually known each other when she used to live in France. So on the day of the execution, she went to the scaffolding that was erected, actually not where all the regular executions used to take place. She was actually executed to the north side of the tower, just to the right of the White Tower. As you come out of the White Tower to the right, in the north part of the garden there. Now, according to the historian Eric Ives, she walked to the scaffold with two of her ladies in waiting. She was wearing a red petticoat and a grey dark damask dress on the outside, lined with fur and ermine. He also said that she looked as if she was as gay as if she was not going to die. So I think it was quite a good front that Anne Boleyn had put on for her last few moments. Now, at the scaffold on the block, as I said, she knew the executioner, and he knew she had a fear of executions. And so he actually hid the sword underneath the straw, and so to get her unaware. So she knelt down with saying her prayers, and at that stage he called out, "Boy, bring me my sword." And with that, he took out the sword from underneath the straw. And she was unaware, because she looked up to see him call out for his sword, and that's when he sliced off her head, and her head fell to the ground. Now, as it is custom, the executioner picked up the head to show to the crowd, to show that the job had been done. And in this case, and it's recorded, that her eyes were still looking around at the people, and she was still whispering her prayers. And this lasted for about 20 seconds. Quite unnerving. Sort of things that horror films are made of. And ladies in waiting, she didn't actually have a proper coffin. It was quite a narrow box they had, and so she was placed in this box, and her head was placed underneath her arm. And she was taken to St. Peter ad Vincula, which is the chapel in the Tower of London, and that's where she was buried, basically in an unmarked area of the chapel. It wasn't until the 1800s, when Queen Victoria was inspecting the chapel, that Queen Victoria tripped. That was because the floor in the chapel was slowly sinking, and so Queen Victoria said to have the chapel restored, and with all the people that was buried there, and these were the unmarked graves of the people that were executed as well, and from Tower Hill, to be taken out and identified and put in a proper marked grave. And so the best they could, because don't forget, a lot of them were just thrown in there. So with what they've done, they've marked most of the graves, and they found Anne Boleyn's, and she's now actually has a plaque in the chapel that she is buried there. But maybe they caught her unaware, which is the whole idea, so it would be quick and painless. But if her mind is still thinking of being on Earth and still to be executed, maybe that's why we see her walking around everywhere. Because not only at the Tower, she's been reported to have been seen at Hever Castle, where she grew up, at Hampton Court, and other various places as well. And in fact, there's stories of her walking around the Tower with her head under her arm. There's been a story of a guard who actually saw this apparition coming towards him, and he said to stop, and she didn't stop. In fact, she went right through him, and this actually scared him so much that he collapsed, and he was about to be court-martialed because they said he was drunk on duty. But at least 2 other people came forward to say they saw the apparition as well, and so he was released from the crime. And maybe this was a reenactment of the energies that were absorbed in the surroundings and replayed again, which is why she didn't listen to the guard and just went on walking straight through him. But why was she carrying her head, though? Strange questions on the paranormal, which I personally think quantum physics will all explain. But there are so many strange things going on at the Tower that I haven't got time for all of them in this episode. So I have a second episode. So join us next week, and I'll bring you more ghosts of the Tower, like the 2 princes who disappeared, and Lady Jane Grey, Queen for 9 days. So don't forget, press the like button if you've liked this episode, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and therefore press the bell so you will be notified when part 2 of the Ghosts of the Tower of London gets released. And tell your friends and share the video and tell them all. So until next week, stay safe.